The gentle hum of the Boeing 777 was a familiar lullaby to some, a source of mild anxiety to others. For Elijah Vance, a 17-year-old with eyes that seemed to absorb the world with a quiet intensity, it was simply a mode of transport, a necessary step towards a future he was meticulously building. He was on his way from his hometown to the prestigious National Youth Medical Innovation Summit, a gathering of the brightest young minds in the country. It was an honor he'd earned through relentless dedication, countless hours spent not just in classrooms, but in the demanding environment of his city's emergency response volunteer program, a passion few knew the depths of. Elijah sat in an economy window seat, row 34. A well-worn copy of an advanced anatomy textbook rested on his lap, though he wasn't reading. Instead, he observed. He noted the slight tremor in the wing as they passed through a patch of wispy clouds, the practiced smiles of the flight attendants, the subtle shifts in passengers' demeanors. It was a habit, this constant, low-level assessment of his surroundings, a byproduct of his training where situational awareness was paramount. He'd learned that emergencies rarely announced themselves. They whispered clues to those willing to listen. Senior Flight Attendant Diane Garrett moved through the cabin with an air of crisp authority. Her uniform was immaculate, her movements efficient, honed by years of service. When she passed Elijah's row, her gaze flickered over him, a brief, almost imperceptible scan that categorized him young, black, headphones on, though no music played, engrossed in a book. Likely harmless, probably a student, nothing requiring her particular attention. She offered a generic, fleeting smile before continuing her duties. Elijah, accustomed to such cursory dismissals in spaces where he was often an anomaly, felt no particular sting. He knew his worth, even if the world often seemed to need a dramatic demonstration to catch up. Further up the plane, in the plush cocoon of first class, Mrs. Clara Hayes shifted uncomfortably in her spacious seat. Her pregnancy was advanced, the swell of her belly prominent beneath the soft cashmere of her wrap. She took a slow, deliberate breath, trying to ease the dull ache in her lower back. Her husband, Mr. Julian Hayes, a man whose name was synonymous with tech innovation and considerable wealth, leaned towards her, his brow furrowed with concern. "Everything all right, my love?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble of affection. "Just a bit of pressure," Clara said, attempting a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The doctor said to expect some discomfort. I'll be fine." Ms. Garrett noticed Mrs. Hayes's slight grimace as she passed. "Can I get you anything, Mrs. Hayes?" "Another pillow, perhaps." Her tone was deferential, attentive, a stark contrast to the impersonal glance afforded to those in the rows behind the curtain. "No, thank you, Diane," Clara replied. "I'm just a little tired." Mr. Hayes, however, watched his wife with an unease that didn't dissipate. He was a man used to controlling outcomes, to solving problems with swift, decisive action. The unpredictability of pregnancy, especially during air travel, gnawed at him. Back in row 34, Elijah had finally opened his textbook, but his attention was only partially on the intricate diagrams of the human circulatory system. The slight increase in turbulence was noticeable, the fastened seatbelt sign pinging on. He glanced out the window, observing the darkening clouds. His internal checklist began to run, a subconscious review of emergency exits, the behavior of the crew, the general mood of the passengers. It wasn't fear, it was preparedness, a state of being that had become second nature. A young child a few rows ahead began to wail, his cries quickly soothed by a parent. A businessman tapped furiously on his laptop, oblivious to the subtle shifts in the plane's movement. The air in the cabin grew a little cooler. Elijah pulled his worn hoodie tighter around him, its faded logo of the City Youth Emergency Corps barely visible. He was an invisible passenger, one of hundreds, yet he carried within him a repository of knowledge and skill that was about to become extraordinarily visible. The whispers of an impending crisis were starting to gather, unheard by most, but prickling at the edges of Elijah Vance's heightened awareness. He hoped, as he always did, that his skills would not be needed. But he was, as always, ready. The turbulence, initially a gentle rocking, intensified. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, calm but firm, advising passengers to remain seated and ensure their seatbelts were securely fastened. It was standard procedure, yet an undercurrent of anxiety began to ripple through the cabin. For Elijah Vance, the tightened atmosphere was a familiar precursor, the air growing taut before a storm. He closed his textbook, his senses now fully alert, his gaze sweeping his immediate environment before drifting towards the front of the plane. In first class, Clara Hayes gasped, her hand flying to her swollen abdomen. A sharp, insistent pain, far more acute than any discomfort she'd experienced before, shot through her. She squeezed her eyes shut, her breath catching in her throat. "Julian," she managed, her voice strained. Something's wrong." Mr. Hayes was by her side in an instant, his face paling as he saw the genuine distress in his wife's eyes. "What is it? What do you feel?" "It's a sharp pain, and oh." She winced, another wave washing over her. "It's coming too fast." Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through Julian Hayes. He fumbled for the call button, pressing it repeatedly. Senior Flight Attendant Diane Garrett arrived, her professional composure firmly in place, though a flicker of alarm showed in her eyes as she took in Mrs. Hayes's evident pain and Mr. Hayes's frantic expression. "Mrs. Hayes, what's happening?" Miss Garrett asked, her voice even. "It's her labor." "I think, but it's too soon. She's only 32 weeks." Julian exclaimed, his voice tight with fear. "We need a doctor." "Is there a doctor on board?" Garrett immediately leaned towards the intercom microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, your attention please. We have a medical situation in the first-class cabin. If there is a medical doctor or a registered nurse on board, please identify yourself to a member of the flight crew immediately." Her voice was authoritative, cutting through the rising murmur of the passengers. A tense silence followed, broken only by Clara's soft moans. No doctor or nurse came forward. "Okay," Miss Garrett said, her training kicking in. "Mr. Hayes, we'll make her as comfortable as possible. I'll contact the flight deck. We'll get medical advice from the ground." "Maria!" she called to her junior colleague, Maria Rodriguez, who hurried over, her face etched with concern. "Get the emergency medical kit and a blanket." As Maria rushed off, Miss Garrett tried to soothe Clara. "Deep breaths, Mrs. Hayes. We're taking care of you." But Clara's distress was escalating. Her breathing became shallow, her face beaded with sweat. I feel dizzy," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "And there's pressure, a lot of pressure." Back in economy, Elijah had heard the announcement. His heart rate quickened. A premature labor on a plane, miles from a hospital, was a high-risk scenario. He unbuckled his seatbelt, a sense of urgent responsibility overriding the captain's instructions to remain seated. He needed to see what was happening. He moved quietly, purposefully, towards the curtain separating economy from first class. He reached the partition just as Maria Rodriguez was returning with the medical kit. Catching a glimpse past her, Elijah saw Mrs. Hayes, her face ashen, and Mr. Hayes, his complexion gray with worry, holding her hand. Ms. Garrett was attempting to take Clara's pulse, her expression increasingly strained. Elijah noticed something Ms. Garrett, in her focus on standard procedure, seemed to be missing. Clara's breathing wasn't just shallow. It had a ragged, almost hitching quality. And the way she clutched her abdomen, not just at the front but also towards her back, combined with her pallor, pinned a specific set of warnings in his mind, possibilities beyond even a straightforward premature labor. "Excuse me," Elijah said, his voice low but clear, addressing Maria Rodriguez. "What are her exact symptoms?" Maria, startled, looked at the young man. Ms. Garrett, overhearing him, turned sharply. "Young man, please return to your seat. We have this under control." Her tone was clipped, dismissive. The last thing she needed was a curious teenager interfering. "But I have emergency medical training," Elijah stated, not aggressively, but with a calm certainty that was hard to ignore. "City Youth Emergency Corps, advanced level." What was her blood pressure? Is she experiencing any referred pain, specifically in her shoulder? Ms. Garrett's eyes narrowed. "We are following protocol. This is a first-class cabin matter. Please go back to your seat. Now." The implication was clear: he didn't belong here, and his input was neither needed nor desired. The injustice of it, the dismissal based on his age, his appearance, his seat assignment, was a familiar sting. But there was no time for frustration. "With all due respect, ma'am," Elijah persisted, his gaze fixed on Mrs. Hayes, whose condition seemed to worsen by the second. Her symptoms might indicate something more complex than just premature labor. Is she bleeding? Is her abdomen rigid? These were critical diagnostic questions, far beyond the typical scope of a curious passenger. Mr. Hayes, desperate for any sign of competence, looked from Ms. Garrett to Elijah. He saw the unwavering focus in the teenager's eyes, the precision of his questions. "Who are you?" Mr. Hayes asked, his voice hoarse. "My name is Elijah Vance. I'm a certified emergency medical responder." Before Ms. Garrett could intervene again, Clara let out a sharp cry and her body went limp, her eyes rolling back slightly. "Clara!" Mr. Hayes shouted, his voice cracking with terror. Ms. Garrett fumbled with the oxygen mask. The situation was deteriorating faster than she could manage. The carefully constructed edifice of her professional control was crumbling, revealing a raw, urgent fear. And the young man she had just dismissed was watching, his expression unreadable but radiating an unnerving calm. The sight of Clara Hayes losing consciousness galvanized Elijah. The time for deference, for polite suggestions, was over. Lives were at stake, two of them. He stepped decisively past the stunned Maria Rodriguez and into the small, crowded space around Clara's seat. Lay her flat, head tilted back slightly to clear her airway. Elijah commanded, his voice imbued with an authority that cut through the rising panic. It was the tone he used during drill simulations when seconds counted, a tone that brooked no argument. Mr. Hayes, startled by the sudden shift in command, but desperate for any lifeline, immediately helped lower his wife's seat into a reclining position. Ms. Garrett, momentarily frozen by the rapid escalation and Elijah's unexpected takeover, opened her mouth to object, but no words came out. The sheer confidence and focused energy radiating from the teenager were, in that moment, more compelling than any airline manual. What Ms. Garrett hadn't factored in. The narrative might have whispered, had there been an observer not caught in the maelstrom, was Elijah Vance's relentless dedication. He wasn't just a volunteer, he was the team lead for his city youth emergency corps unit, the one who thrived under pressure, the one who had aced every practical exam, from mass casualty incidents to advanced cardiac life support simulations. He had spent hundreds of hours in mock emergencies that felt terrifyingly real, steeling his nerves and honing his instincts. Oxygen mask, secure fit, highest concentration. Elijah instructed Maria, who, seeing the decisiveness lacking in her superior, quickly fumbled with the mask and tubing. "What's her pulse?" he asked, his own fingers already pressing gently against Clara's carotid artery. He didn't wait for an answer. "Pulse is thready, rapid. Skin is cool and clammy. We need to treat for shock. Elevate her legs." Mr. Hayes, his face a mask of anguish, looked to Elijah. "What's happening to her? Is it the baby?" "It could be several things, sir," Elijah said, his focus absolute as he worked. "Premature labor can cause distress, but this looks like it might be complicated by something else, perhaps a placental issue or severe dehydration leading to hypovolemic shock. We need to stabilize her now." He spoke calmly, but with an undercurrent of urgency that spurred everyone to action. Ms. Garrett finally found her voice, though it was laced with a mixture of indignation and dawning realization. "The captain is trying to get a medical consultant on the radio." "Good," Elijah acknowledged without looking up. "Tell them we have a pregnant patient, approximately 32 weeks, unresponsive, tachycardic, possibly hypotensive. Request immediate diversion to the nearest suitable airport with advanced obstetric and neonatal facilities. But right now, she needs immediate intervention." He turned to Maria. "Is there a full obstetrics kit in the emergency supplies, or just the basic delivery kit?" Maria shook her head, her eyes wide. "Just basic, for an unexpected delivery. Nothing for major complications." Elijah's jaw tightened. This limited his options, but not his resolve. "Okay, we work with what we have. Mr. Hayes, keep talking to her. Even if she can't respond, hearing your voice might help." Under Elijah's clear, concise directions, the small space transformed into a makeshift emergency room. He had Maria retrieve several blankets, tucking them around Clara to conserve body heat. He meticulously monitored her pulse and respirations, his brow furrowed in concentration. He asked Maria to find a blood pressure cuff, hoping the aircraft's medical kit had one that wasn't purely automated, as he needed accurate, quick readings. "What about an IV?" Mr. Hayes asked, clutching his wife's hand. "Can we give her fluids?" Elijah looked at him, his expression regretful. "I'm trained for IV insertion, sir, but airline regulations and the contents of this kit likely don't permit me to start one. Even if they had the supplies, it's too high a risk without the proper sterile environment and physician oversight. We focus on maintaining her airway, oxygenation, and circulation with the tools available." Ms. Garrett, now relegated to the periphery, watched the young man work. Her initial irritation had given way to a grudging, then astonishing realization this teenager, whom she had dismissed so readily, was operating with a level of skill and composure she had rarely witnessed, even among seasoned paramedics. He wasn't just following a checklist, he was critically thinking, adapting, leading. The way he palpated for a pulse, his precise language, his calm command, it all spoke of genuine, practiced expertise. A profound sense of shame began to wash over her. Her prejudice, her adherence to a rigid hierarchy, might have cost precious minutes. "The captain confirms we're diverting," Ms. Garrett reported, her voice subdued, addressing Elijah directly now, no longer as a subordinate but as someone in charge. "We're heading to a city about 45 minutes out with a level 3 trauma center and neonatal ICU. They'll have a full medical team waiting." 45 minutes, Elijah repeated, his gaze unwavering from Clara. "Okay, we need to keep her stable until then." He noticed a slight flutter of Clara's eyelids. "Mrs. Hayes, Clara, can you hear me?" A faint moan was her only response, but it was something. "That's good, Clara, stay with us," Elijah urged gently. He then looked at Mr. Hayes. Her unresponsiveness might be due to a vasovagal episode exacerbated by pain and dehydration, or something more severe. "We need to be prepared for anything." What no one in that confined space yet fully understood was the depth of Elijah's training in pre-hospital trauma life support. He was mentally running through differential diagnoses, abruptio placenta, placenta previa, severe preeclampsia, all the catastrophic possibilities that could present with these symptoms in the third trimester. Each diagnosis carried different immediate management priorities within the limitations of an aircraft cabin. "Keep checking her responsiveness," Elijah instructed Maria. "Any change, any seizure activity, you let me know instantly." The next 40 minutes stretched into an eternity. Elijah remained a pillar of calm focus, a stark contrast to the controlled chaos around him. He coached Clara through her breathing when she briefly regained a semblance of consciousness, his voice a steady anchor in her sea of pain and fear. He directed Mr. Hayes on how to provide comfort and support without inadvertently worsening her condition. He was, in essence, conducting an orchestra of emergency response at 30,000 feet, with the most rudimentary of instruments. The arrogance and dismissiveness he had faced earlier were forgotten, replaced by a singular, driving purpose: to deliver Clara Hayes and her unborn child safely to the ground. And as Mr. Julian Hayes watched this young man fight for his wife and child, a profound sense of awe and gratitude began to bloom amidst his terror. This teenager wasn't just helping, he was a lifeline. The descent was rapid but controlled. Elijah remained by Clara Hayes' side, his focus unwavering even as the aircraft banked steeply towards the runway lights that pierced the twilight gloom. He continued to monitor her vital signs, speaking in low, reassuring tones to both her and her distraught husband. The aircraft's emergency medical kit had provided the basics, but it was his knowledge, his ability to interpret subtle signs and anticipate needs, that had bridged the critical gap between the onset of the crisis and professional medical intervention. As soon as the plane taxied to a halt at a remote section of the tarmac, the cabin door was wrenched open. A team of paramedics, grim-faced and laden with equipment, stormed aboard. "Patients here," Elijah said, his voice still calm but edged with fatigue. He gave a concise, professional handover. "Approximately 32 Weak pregnant female, presented with acute abdominal pain, dizziness, and a period of unresponsiveness. Suspected premature labor with possible complicating factors, query placental abruption, or severe vasovagal syncope. Maintained oxygen, elevated legs, monitored vitals. Pulse has remained rapid but slightly stronger in the last 10 minutes. Intermittent responsiveness. The lead paramedic, a seasoned veteran, gave Elijah a quick, appraising look, surprised by the clarity and detail of the report coming from someone so young. There was no time for questions. The team swarmed around Clara, their movements practiced and efficient, attaching monitors, preparing an IV line, their professional jargon a flurry in the confined space. Mr. Julian Hayes watched, his hands clenched, as they carefully transferred his wife onto a gurney. He made to follow, but then stopped, turning back to the young man who had been an unwavering beacon in the storm. Elijah was stepping back, allowing the professionals to work, his posture wary but still alert. The front of his simple hoodie was creased, and there was a smudge of something, perhaps just dirt, perhaps a trace of medical gel on his sleeve. "Thank you," Mr. Hayes said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out, placing a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "Whatever happens, thank you. You saved her. You saved them." Elijah met his gaze, a hint of a tired smile touching his lips. "I just did what I could, sir. They're in the best hands now." The paramedics expertly maneuvered the gurney towards the open door and down the ramp to the waiting ambulance, its lights flashing silently. Mr. Hayes made to follow, then hesitated again, torn. He looked at Elijah, then back at the retreating gurney. "Come with me," Mr. Hayes urged. "To the hospital." "Please." Elijah nodded. He felt a profound connection to the outcome, a need to know that Mrs. Hayes and her baby would be okay. The ambulance ride was a blur of medical activity and strained silence. At the hospital, Clara was rushed into the emergency department, then whisked away to the labor and delivery unit's specialized care wing. Mr. Hayes paced the sterile corridor like a caged lion, his earlier composure shattered, replaced by raw, unvarnished fear. Elijah sat quietly on a waiting room chair, a forgotten figure in the unfolding drama, yet the one who had rewritten its initial, desperate trajectory. Hours crawled by. Finally, a doctor, her face tired but kind, emerged. "Mr. Hayes." Julian Hayes lunged forward. "My wife. My baby." Mrs. Hayes experienced a significant placental abruption, which caused the premature labor and her instability. The doctor explained. It was critical. Thanks to the immediate and effective first aid, she received en route, particularly maintaining her oxygen levels and treating for shock. We were able to stabilize her quickly enough to perform an emergency C-section. Your wife is stable and recovering, and you have a son, Mr. Hayes. He's premature in the NICU, but he's a fighter. Relief, so potent it was almost a physical blow, buckled Julian Hayes's knees. He sagged against the wall, tears streaming down his face. A son. She's okay, they're okay. After a few moments, he straightened, his gaze searching for and finding Elijah. He walked over to the young man, his expression one of profound, almost unbearable gratitude. They're okay, he choked out. The doctor said, "What you did on that plane, you gave them the chance they needed." He paused, struggling for words. Behind the scenes, a different plan was unfolding in Mr. Sterling's mind, one involving a blank check. The thought was there, the intention to offer a fortune, a reward that could change Elijah's life in an instant. He had already, in the anxious hours of waiting, mentally drafted offers of full college scholarships to any university in the world, a trust fund, a car, anything the boy could possibly want. "Elijah," Mr. Hayes said, his voice regaining some of its customary strength, though now imbued with a deep humility. "There are no words to express what I owe you. Anything. Anything you want, anything you need, it's yours. Name it." He reached for his checkbook, a gesture of habit for a man accustomed to solving problems and expressing gratitude through financial means. Elijah looked at Mr. Hayes, truly seeing the depth of emotion in the millionaire's eyes. He thought of the summit he was missing, the reason he was on that plane in the first place. He thought of his neighborhood, of the underfunded community center where his emergency corps team met, often struggling for basic supplies, using outdated mannequins, dreaming of better equipment that could help them save more lives in their own community. He thought of his teammates, bright, dedicated kids like him, whose potential was often overlooked because of where they came from. He took a slow breath. "Mr. Hayes," he began, his voice quiet but firm, "your wife and son being safe is all the reward I could ever ask for. But if you're serious, I've never been more serious in my life," Julian Hayes affirmed, his gaze intense. "My youth emergency response team, we operate out of the Northwood Community Center. We have incredible kids, really dedicated, but our equipment is old. We need new CPR mannequins, advanced bleeding control trainers, even just basic supplies like bandages and splints. We're trying to get a new simulation ambulance rig too, to train for real-world scenarios. If you wanted to help with something like that, it would make a huge difference to a lot of people. It would help us train more young people to do what I was able to do today." Julian Hayes stared at Elijah, stunned into silence. He had expected a request for something personal, money, a connection, an opportunity. This was something else entirely. The selflessness of it, the sheer, unadulterated altruism from a teenager who had just performed a heroic act under immense pressure, was overwhelming. The boy held the power to ask for a personal fortune, and instead he asked for tools to empower others. A wave of emotion, stronger than the relief he'd felt just moments before, washed over Julian Hayes. Tears welled in his eyes, not of sorrow or fear this time, but of a profound, humbling awe. This young man, this quiet, unassuming teenager, possessed a richness of character that no amount of money could buy. The millionaire, a titan of industry, a man who could move markets with a word, found himself utterly undone by the simple, noble request of a 17-year-old. He reached out, not for his checkbook, but to grip Elijah's arm, his own tears now flowing freely. "Yes," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Yes, consider it done. And more, so much more." Meanwhile, back at the airline's operational headquarters, Senior Flight Attendant Diane Garrett was giving her report. She recounted the events with painstaking honesty, not sparing her own initial misjudgment, her dismissal of Elijah. She described his calm competence, his leadership. Her voice was subdued, her usual crisp authority replaced by a deep sense of humility. The airline officials listened gravely. The implications were clear. A passenger had saved the day when their own trained crew member had faltered, partly due to that crew member's prejudice. An internal review was already underway. For Ms. Garrett, the confrontation with her own failings was a bitter, but necessary reckoning. The days that followed were a whirlwind, yet anchored by a profound sense of hope. Clara Hayes made a steady recovery, the skill of her surgeons, and the advanced care she received playing their part. Little Adam Hayes, as his parents named him, grew stronger each day in the neonatal intensive care unit, a tiny but tenacious fighter. Julian Hayes was a constant presence at the hospital, his immense relief and gratitude solidifying into a quiet determination. He had been given a gift beyond measure, facilitated by the extraordinary actions of a young man he barely knew. True to his word, and far exceeding Elijah's humble request, Julian Hayes didn't just donate to the Northwood Community Center's Emergency Corps. He launched the Vance Initiative for Youth Emergency Preparedness. It was a multi-million-dollar foundation aimed at establishing and equipping youth emergency response programs in underserved communities across the state, with Elijah's own Northwood team as its flagship and first major beneficiary. They received not only state-of-the-art training equipment, including advanced simulation mannequins and a fully kitted, out-retired ambulance refurbished as a mobile training unit, but also funding for scholarships, uniforms, and participation in national competitions. Elijah Vance, who had quietly returned home after ensuring Mrs. Hayes was stable, found himself unexpectedly in the spotlight. News of his heroism, initially confined to the airline and the hospital, had been subtly but effectively shared by a grateful Julian Hayes, who wanted the world to know what true character looked like. Elijah was interviewed by local and then national news outlets, not as a boy who got lucky, but as a skilled young medical responder who had demonstrated exceptional competence and grace under pressure. He spoke eloquently about his passion for emergency medicine and his desire to see more young people, especially from backgrounds like his, get opportunities in STEM and healthcare fields. The National Youth Medical Innovation Summit, which he had missed, invited him to be a keynote speaker at their next event and offered him a full scholarship to their affiliated pre-med summer program at a prestigious university. Doors he hadn't even known existed were suddenly swinging wide open. For senior flight attendant Diane Garrett, the aftermath was different. The airline's internal review was thorough. While her years of service were taken into account, her initial dismissal of Elijah and her failure to recognize the severity of the situation until he intervened were serious lapses. She was grounded, mandated to undergo extensive retraining in passenger assessment, implicit bias awareness, and emergency protocol updates, focusing on collaborative crisis management. It was a humbling experience, forcing her to confront the ingrained prejudices she hadn't realized she carried. To her credit, Ms. Garrett undertook the retraining with a newfound openness. The image of Elijah, calm and competent amidst chaos, had permanently dislodged her previous certainties. She later requested to speak at airline training sessions, sharing her story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimation and the importance of listening, regardless of who is speaking. The broader impact of that fateful flight rippled outwards. The airline reviewed and enhanced its onboard emergency medical kits and protocols, incorporating lessons learned from Elijah's intervention. The story sparked a wider conversation about the untapped potential within young people and the importance of community-based programs that nurture such talents. Other philanthropists, inspired by Julian Hayes and Elijah Vance, began to look more closely at similar grassroots initiatives. A few months later, Elijah stood before the gleaming new mobile training unit parked proudly outside the Northwood Community Center. Mr. Hayes was beside him, a genuine smile lighting his face as he watched the diverse group of teenagers from Elijah's team eagerly exploring its features. Clara Hayes, now fully recovered, stood nearby, holding a healthy, cooing baby Adam in her arms. She caught Elijah's eye and mouthed a silent, "Thank you," her expression filled with a warmth that needed no words. "You see, Elijah," Mr. Hayes said quietly, gesturing towards the enthusiastic young responders. "This is what you did, not just for my family, but for all of them. You showed everyone what's possible." Elijah looked at his teammates, their faces bright with excitement and purpose. He saw himself in them, the quiet dedication, the often overlooked potential. His actions on that flight had been born of training and instinct, but his request had been born of a deeper understanding. That true strength lies in lifting others. He was no longer the invisible passenger. He was a catalyst for change, a testament to the fact that heroism and leadership could emerge from the most unexpected quarters. His journey had just begun, but he was already helping to pave the way for others to follow. And so, Elijah Vance's journey from an overlooked teenager on a flight to a nationally recognized young hero and founder of a movement serves as a powerful reminder that extraordinary skill and profound integrity can be found where we least expect them, and that one person's courage can indeed reshape lives and inspire systemic change. If this story of resilience, quick thinking, and the fight for a chance to serve stirred something in you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring narratives about people who turned adversity into triumph. What was the most impactful moment for you?